I thought you had a meeting. Ken's trying to get fired. But welcome back, everybody, to this week's Created Hours. We do weekly office hours, by the way. So if you are here or paying attention and would like to join, I guess I should start the space, right? Like, live streaming is like so much work. Let me just unmute here. Let's see there. Okay, yeah. So welcome back, everybody, to Created Hours. This is our weekly office hours where we try to bring together builders and creators and try to help and support each other in the things that we see happening around the creator economy. If you want to find long-form content, head over to createdeconomy.com. It's a great place to find our show notes and a bunch of other things that are going on as well. And we do go live 3 times a week in general. We're nearing the end of the year, though. So tomorrow will be our holiday party, which will be a event that we stream for a few hours tomorrow. Try to get all of our friends who have been previously on the show, etc. Give them a chance to come by, give us an update on how they're doing and all the other things like that. We will also have our news show on Friday. So if you get a chance and you want to pop in, we do the news from the creator economy on Friday mornings. So let's get right into it, though. Today, this week, and if you do want to join, by the way, we are live in the Zealous studio, so you can head over to created.show/live if you want to join us for that show as well. But today we're going to be talking about something that I think is it's been coming up more and more for me, at least. And I have my friends here, Abhinav and Arnold, both who are building community platforms in different interpretations on community platforms. But, I think what's interesting about where we are today is there seems to be this conflation of the idea that basically there is some conflation that like an audience is a community kind of by default, right? And I find this very troubling and problematic, I think, because I think it's giving maybe a false sense of security to creators. It is robbing sort of like it's hiding or I guess or obfuscating sort of the responsibility of actually running and managing a community. And so I wanted to chat with you guys about, both as builders of community softwares and platforms on your own, a few things I wanted to get sort of across, I guess. Like one was just sort of the distinction between an audience and a community. Then I think like what you imagine or envision like the trappings of a good community are, right? Like what makes for one, right? And then I guess ultimately like you're building platforms. So actually we're all building community platforms, right? So like, why are we investing in this direction so much right now, I guess, right? Like, and why do we think it's going to matter? So before we do that, do you guys want to just do a quick intro and just say hello and let everyone know like where your companies are and whatnot as well?
Yeah, I'll go first and I think I'm in the middle. My name is Avgor. I'm a co-founder for YourFeed, which is a video messaging platform. Now a Web3 video messaging platform. And yeah, it's a quick intro.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Arnold Cano. I'm building a platform called Hangglide. We essentially help music artists to build to basically build community groups, right? So all their biggest fans in one large paid community. Just a better way to make sure that they're engaging those top fans. So quick high level view.
Nice. Yeah. Sweet. So let's get back to this first question, I guess, right? Can you guys describe the distinction, I guess, that you see between sort of a sort of an audience versus a community? Because I know we've got I'm starting to see like the investment side sort of acknowledge that, hey, it's not a community just because you have an audience. But like, what have you observed, I guess, in chatting with your own creators that are on your platforms or, any of that? What are your thoughts, I guess, on the switch or the evolution from audience or followers to audience to community?
Yeah, so I can think. Oh, go ahead, Abhinav. Yeah.
Okay. So I think for me, if you think from the social world, right, the audience for me is kind of in its simplest form, a list of people that a platform thinks are interested in what you're producing. And that's in its simplest form. And some of that may be a community and some of it may not. And that comes down to how people interact with that list of people. Because you can see creators and anyone who's producing content online. There are people who produce, and there's people who discuss what they've produced, and then there's people who produce something and they go right in their comments and they're talking to their fans, and there's a different level of engagement. I think it can be one of both things, but in the simplest way, in the social world and audiences, kind of a platform's understanding of who likes you. And then in today's world is kind of, once we've, the internet is moving to a level of maturity that there's lots of that, all those lists are big, right? Then it's about, okay, well, how do you segregate into, well, my true fans only don't want to be interacting in this large open space where it's like anybody and everybody has the same say. So it's then segmenting that into more tiered ownerships or tiered interactions that may or may not be paid, but just kind of providing different levels of forum with different levels of conversation can take place.
Okay. Arnold, what do you think?
Yeah, no, so I think, it's a big topic, right? I'm sure we'll get into the details of it. I think there's a couple things that come to mind, right? So on the audience front, I tend to think, mostly passive, right? So, there's more static content coming out. The engagement is fairly, I won't say limited, but it's not as frequent, right? And basically it's everybody that follows you, right? It's everybody in your overall audience is a part of this. So whereas I think a community tends to be much more engaging, and that engagement has to be more frequent, right? And in many cases, you could argue even live to a large degree, just to really keep people interested. And then I think both on the creator end and for the member end, there needs to be active engagement within that community, within just members, and then also within members and the creator. So I think it's a very different animal that actually requires a whole different skill set and quite a bit of work actually to keep that community healthy and actively talking and moving, right? Whereas, yeah.
No, I agree. And so I guess to double click a little bit into this, right? And I think Arnold, you touched on some of this, and Abhinav, you touched on this as well. What's the operating model, I guess, right? Like when you have an audience, right? What are the kinds of activities that you're doing there versus say like in a community, like when you have a community, right? Like, because, what I see is oftentimes, I think, if we look at the traditional evolution of sort of like the creator economy, right? Like everyone was in the audience business, right? Like, and you hear a lot of these tropes, like, the comments is not a community, right? Like a Discord is not a community, right? Like, so there's all these things because there's clearly something tangible. The operating model changes when you have a community, I think, right? Than when you have an audience, right? And so I'm just curious of that distinction. And by the way, also curious, I guess, do the tools have to be like, as we are all building tools, do they have to be exclusive, right? Like to one or the other, right? Like, is your feed viable for your audience as well as for the community? Like, or is Hangglide viable like for both of those situations, right? Or is it like really like a hard choice that someone makes to go one way or the other?
Yeah, no, so I think I'll just kind of jump in on that one. I think that for me, at least, and I think how we've positioned Hangglide, right, is that it's about a deeper level of engagement than just the standard audience sort of viewing and I guess more or less passive, engagement to whatever you're doing, right? This is the group of folks that actually want to get in deeper. They want to get closer. They want to learn more. They want to talk more, not only with you as a creator, but with other people that are like-minded, that are, in that equally passionate space, right? So I think that's part of it. I think the other piece, you kind of touched on or questioned like what makes it more difficult, I suppose, than just like an audience, right? Well, you as the community owner have to be putting in some effort to actually help to drive conversations, right? Because they don't just sort of happen organically amongst everybody, at least the meaningful ones, right? That takes a lot of effort to actually kind of come in and make sure you're kind of dropping in little bits here and there to kind of help spur conversations and help to really provide that deeper level of value into the community, right? The thing that actually helps people to feel like they should be here and want to stay. And then even to help inspire them to contribute, right? And to help, to to help really make it valuable for everybody. So it's quite a bit of effort to keep that whole thing moving.
Right. Yeah. Abhinav, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to bastardize this quote, but there was a quote that I read, I think it was on Twitter, about a community is one where its participants take on a disproportionate level of interest or responsibility for the community's welfare. So it's basically saying that everybody who's here is taking on everyone else's welfare, right? And I think that for me kind of is a nice definition of community. It's like, you know, I'm not just here for myself. And if a creator or anyone is building a community, then they have to embody that. They have to display that characteristic themselves. That's how they have to run the community. That's what the purpose of the community has to be. It can't just be, I'm here to sell my product, right? I'm making music, you know, come watch my video. It can't just be that. It has to be the greater community benefits from this. I'm not just in it to achieve my one goal, which is views or sales, yada, yada, yada. So in terms of an operating model, I think, you know, that kind of, you know, if you look at an Instagram page or whatever, that could be how those operate, because people come in and out, and there doesn't have to be too much of a transaction. Emotionally, financially, it's kind of like, oh, that was interesting, cool, like, move on, maybe comment, move on, maybe I'll investigate further. And I think that translating it from that transient interaction to more meaningful, how do our interactions benefit each other more? I think that's kind of the difference in maybe the sort of this thought process. I don't know about the operating model. I'm not sure that's answering your question.
No, I think it does. I guess you guys are hitting on what I'm sort of alluding to, I think, right? Is just that, yeah. So I think, like, if we think in terms of, say, attention, right? Like, you know, there's transactional attention, like, I'll give you 5 seconds, 10 seconds of my time to consume this piece of content. It feels like a contract, almost like a social contract, is created, though, on the other end, right? Like when you get into a community. Now there's a lot of grazers, though, right? Like, so I guess this is what I was sort of thinking about, is this, like, there's a spectrum. You don't, like, just join a community and boom, I'm in, like, you know, like you're there, right? Like, you know, is the normal math is still, I think, fairly common, right? You still have, like, kind of the 1%, 9%, 90% thing, right? Like, what is it? The 1% will create content. 9% or so, like, will interact with it, right? And the other 90% are just going to be consumers. And that's that pyramid is still going to apply inside of your community as well. Here's an interesting question for you all. Does the creator have to be in the community?
I mean, I would say
I think.
Sorry. I would say no, just on the premise of the fact that I've seen great fan communities which are not started by the creators, right? So I think just on that pure simple basis, I don't think so. But at the same time, are you creating enough value for the people who are there that without the main creator there, that they say, you know what, we still have enough to talk about, and it's still exciting enough, and just have so much in common, right? Like Swifties or whatever fan base that they're like, we have so much in common. I don't care if they're not here. Right, and maybe one day they might come, but they may not.
Yeah, Arnold, you know the company that like owns BTS and these other guys, and they have, like, this platform, right? Like,
I've seen that.
Right, I forgot what it's called. It's called, like, Mega or something, like, but, like, basically it is a fan community, like, sort of stood up, like, you know, these bands are like manufactured, right? Like. And so, like, they stand up these communities as well. And then occasionally, like, the artists will make, like, a little cameo. And I think, to your point, Abhinav, that they do that to, like, keep dangling sort of this engagement, right? So that you're like, hey, this is why you want to still be in here, and you want to be, like, you know, matriculating up and whatnot, right? In there.
But it's interesting too, though, like, because I think it's different types of community, obviously, right? So there's a community where it's about the creator and it's about, you know, you getting a deeper level of engagement with them and some type of growth or value directly from the creator. But, you know, in this model, I mean, we're talking about just like minds coming together, right? And it's not necessarily, I think it's actually less about the creator or the artist in this case. It's really more about the people themselves that have this thing that they have in common, that they want to talk to somebody about and communicate with somebody about who's equally as passionate and fanatic about it, right? And so that gives them the sort of safe space to do that.
No, I agree, and I do think there's we should also equally not bastardize the word community into like one sort of like a shapeless thing that like they all conform to sort of, because there are many interpretations of it. There's working groups, et cetera, right? Like that all may form around it. DAOs now, right? Like as organizations that actually have like deeper meaning and purpose. So yeah, there is a lot of interoperability there. So I guess you guys we're all building tools. I keep saying that because I formerly didn't really think of us as a community platform, but I guess like I'm rounding into that arena more now too. So, but
I get value from from your community. So yeah, we're a community.
Yeah. But I guess like let's think in terms of the capabilities or the functions of a community now, right? Like so what like that Jeff Foxworthy, he had that whole like you might be a redneck if, right? Like kind of line of joking, right? How would you know if you have a community, I guess, right? Like what are the signs or the signals that either one that you have a community or more importantly that you have a successful community, right? Like because obviously I think we're all building capabilities and features to drive towards a successful state, but how do we know like that we've achieved that for our creators and their members?
So I mean, I think there's a number of different ways we can kind of like brainstorm through them, but I think the number one thing is that you've got people actively engaging and talking back, right? If you put a bunch of people into a Slack group and nobody's saying anything, then that's not really a community, right? It's just your audience in another place now, right? Again, I think it really is the amount of activity that's actually happening, not only between the individuals, but between the individuals and that creator. I think that's probably one of the key indicators that you have a community. And that I should say that also doesn't necessarily, even if you haven't officially organized your folks into a community, right? You could be on any platform, and if that back and forth communication is happening, even if it's kind of messy and chaotic, if it's happening, or if folks are trying to make it happen, I think that's a really good indication that you have the early stages of a community, and you need to do something to actually foster that, right? And nurture it.
Even if you look at our little community, right? If you look at how that manifests is people seeking more engagement, right? It's like, okay, we're talking to each other on this level, in this forum, on this stage, but I want more. I want to be able to talk about in this way, in this format, with these tools. I want that additional level of interaction. I want to have that course maybe in a smaller group of 3 people or 4 people. I want it, but me going, I want more of what I have here, and that can apply in whether it's with a creator or whatever. So it might be going on an Instagram page and saying, God, I wish I could just talk to you in a Discord, right? Boom, Discord, right? God, I wish you could actually just do live calls. Okay, boom, like Zealous call, right?
Right.
Asking.
Interesting. Yes.
That's a great point too. I just want to point out, like, that's exactly what happened, right? Like we were all kind of hanging out on the Created After Dark, right? And just kind of, and I started to look forward to that, like week over week, and then it's like, just make this a community, right?
Yeah.
So it can start, like, I mean, I would argue we were a community then, right? Just in that After Dark, live. So.
Sure. Yeah, and I think I think the point that the distinction you're both making, which I think is important, is it's not just about volume, right? Like I think it's also about like fidelity, right? Like so I've been trying to frame this up to some degree. I did take a note, like kind of in like and I brought this up with Ken a little bit I think last week, but I think, I was never like one of those big, like consultant types. Like I think Abhinav was, right? Like, but my brain still reduces things to 2x2 grids. Right? Like, I don't know why. Like, and as I thought about it, I'm trying to figure out like what are good axes, like, and the exercise in general is like what helps divide the world the best, right? Like the most meaningful distinctions in there. And this is always one first part of the exercise when you try to make these, right, is ultimately like there's a lot of candidates for like it's X versus Y. What are your X versus Y's? I guess like if you think about the community space, like, how would you frame it up before I share sort of the one I've come up with?
The way that I've been thinking about it, and sometimes it depends who you're talking to, right? It depends who you're trying to express that to. But for me, at the moment, the way I've been thinking about it is kind of about that fidelity. So text, audio, image, video, versus level of decentralization and shared ownership and Web3 practices. So that's the two scales of the quality of the medium and how people play in that medium. What is the level of shared ownership that people have?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, and then just to clarify a little bit about the other scale there, because I get the quality one, I definitely understand.
Yeah.
Why do you have that secondary scale? I guess like, what do you think the impact is of sort of that vector?
Well, because I think that what people seek, and of course, this is not everybody. This is the communities that I find myself in more at the moment. This is the ones where my headspace is at. So it's not any kind of analysis on what's going on in the world as overall, but the ones that I'm touching, they are more. I see a greater demand for shared ownership and tools that serve a community-owned, community-driven model. So anywhere we can analyze ourselves in how we're doing on that, considering what the full spectrum of that is, it helps us understand where we fit in the overall picture. So in the non-decentralized pool, it would be like a Discord, right? So very centralized ownership, but with but starting to bring in some Web3 tools, but still not really it's kind of giving you the tooling without giving you the sort of underlying basis of it.
It's like a cohesiveness kind of score, right? Like, because like, I guess like to your point, like we could all like tweet about things in the same direction and technically be part. Like I'm looking at our space and I see 3 of my friends from the X-Punks community have joined us, right? And I know because we all have the same PFP, right? Yeah. So that's a very loose, like very not a like hugely cohesive thing. Like now, of course, we might all be concentrate also in the Discord, say, and that's another way to add to that sort of concentration, that cohesion, right? And by the way, I've noticed this, for example, like where you'll see sometimes people will have 30,000 followers on Twitter, or they'll have 10,000 followers on Twitter, but their Discord's got 50,000 people in it, right? Because people actually seek out the cohesive thing, that tightness, right? More so than they want the looseness, right? I like that. That's an interesting approach. Arnold, I guess if in framing community, what's your 2x2 grid in terms of like understanding the landscape?
So it's actually quite similar to
you can't use any of the things Abhinav said.
So I gotta be brand new. No, I mean, I think it's, there's a number of different thoughts, but I think the key bit is really just kind of separating the larger thing that I think people are looking for around. Again, I keep coming back to this word engagement. I feel like I'm like beating it to death here, but I think it's so key and in the whole thing, right? I mean, there's different platforms you can like certainly go across, like you mentioned Discord, you mentioned Twitter, but it's really just about again the fidelity of the conversation, right? How strong, where can you get that really close connection, right? And so I don't know, like when I'm looking at it, I think that's kind of how I'm looking at it. You can go to like these different spaces, but where do you really get that true strong connection, right? And that's actually what's informed a lot of how we're building and what we're building, right?
Interesting. Yeah, if you use like high school, say, right, like as just think, I just, as you were saying, we were both talking about this, like I use this analogy. I have my best friends from high school from now a long time. Like I don't remember how I graduated high school in '93, so that's like 30 years ago. No, 40 years. No, 30 years ago, right? I'm not good at math. But I have my best friends that I don't ever talk to, right? Like literally, like maybe once in a while, but we go right back to where we were, like automatically, right? Yeah. At the same time, I have a bunch of my other high school people in like a Facebook group, right? And I don't really I know them, I remember their names, I remember them from school, but like there's not a tight cohesiveness, right? And so like that's how these quadrants do seem to play out to me, right? Like is that you can have like really high quality even though there's low cohesiveness, right? Like my best friends from like 30 years ago, right? But then I also have like the other same thing with the same set of people technically, right? Like you can have a low cohesiveness to sort of that group of people, right? My two that I sort of put together was like on the vertical, I did intimate versus public, right? Like AKA, like are things happening like where everyone can see them, or are they happening kind of amongst us, like just, you know, in a smaller universe? And then the other one, I put like a low fidelity versus a high fidelity kind of thing. And so in my mind, I haven't mapped these, but this probably will become a thread, and you know, we'll put it together and put it out there at some point, right? But I sort of like said, like, you know, like at the top I have like, or the bottom, depending on how you frame it, like reactions on social platforms, right? Like, you know, liking, you know, like a heart or whatever, right? Like a heart, I guess, is a higher quality signal than just a pure like when there's a binary system, right? After that, I have commentary, right? Because like you're still potentially in public, but you're offering a little more like, you know, fidelity to the thing, right? I have text-based chat, like, and I'm not talking about companies per se. I'm just more talking about the way we can express it more so. So I have like text-based chat, you know, so live stream inside of a chat or a Slack or a Discord or whatever maybe like offers another layer. Above that, I believe we've got like live audio, which I think actually is in a lot of ways an ideal medium, right? Like, because it offers all the warmth, intimacy, like a voice and conversations, but also without the stigma or the worry of like performing or whatever else may happen, like visually, right? And then, you know, in that arena, we've got things like Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces, et cetera. This is interesting. Now that I've been paying attention more to NFT space and a lot of other Discords, I find it amazing that I'm in a Discord where there's 10,000 people, but where do they do their audio? Not in Discord. They go to Twitter Spaces to do it still, right? And I see it over and over again. And I'm not sure, maybe because they want the co-marketing value of like sharing like that content, right? Like on Twitter. But I just found that really an interesting dynamic. Like I'm just minted an NFT, and the guy who runs it is a YouTuber. Like I follow him, I love him because he produces a bunch of crazy stuff. His name is Hashlips. If you want to follow him, but he puts out code on how to like mint NFTs, and I learned a lot. And I built my own NFTs on my own computer just by following him, and I appreciate that. And so I support him in this way. But what's interesting is he was on Twitter Space announcing the pre-mint was coming up, but now he's in the Discord doing it live with the people in the community, right? So really interesting, like just some of these dynamics, right? So live audio, then I think live video is where I put like after that, right? Because this is obviously like, but you know, like we're in if by the way, if you're listening to the space, you want to join us live in the studio, feel free to head over to created.show/live. You can actually get on stage and be in the live stream as well that we're pushing out. But in the live video scenario, you know, you've got Zooms, you got StreamYards, you got OBS, you got the social platforms, but you know, this is still kind of a performative thing. Maybe it's public, right? But then after that, you got group calls, kind of like we will have like working sessions sometimes to talk behind the scenes, and like we're not doing it in public now, we're doing it in private, right? And then the ultimate pinnacle, the one-on-one, right? Like that one-on-one engagement where just me and you are talking, right? And so it removes, you know, that. And so these are just the strata that I see sort of inside of like like offering more levels of fidelity to our audience. I know all of your platforms are thinking about it. So I'm curious, like how is like say Handglide in your feed mapping into sort of increasing fidelity for, and also because I would love for people to know what you guys are building more of, but like, how are you increasing fidelity for creator fan connections? And also I guess, ultimately for moving audiences to, you know, to community members.
Yeah, for us, the big pièce de resistance is asynchronous communication. So essentially allowing many-to-many video communication and also audio clips, basically letting people have that kind of video experience, but for everybody in the community. So, you know, as you see more and more communities require more of the time, they require more input from a larger number of people. So giving more people that high quality medium. So if you remember that 1%, the 9%, and the 90% in terms of the breakout of the people and how they contribute, we're basically trying to empower that 9% who are willing to get on video, who are willing to speak up, to give them that same platform rather than it being a creator-led discussion and everybody either comes on stage or writes in the comments. Everybody can use that video medium. So for us, it's really using the asynchronous. We've got live functionality as well, but again, it really is trying to elevate that 9%, empower them, and give them the same quality tools as the leaders of an organization or leaders of a group might have.
Nice. Arnold, how about you?
Yeah, ironically, we're the exact opposite in a lot of ways of what I just described.
You're wrong.
So, you got it all wrong, but let me tell you why. No, so the approach we've taken is that for a creator and music artist in this particular case, like that smaller percentage of their overall fan base or audience wants that a deeper connection. So, but they want to be a part of that community. So we built this space where the artist can come in and host this community space for those more engaged fans, if you will. But it's very clear that the artist is actually running it. And so like in the case of like the live chat or the live streaming and things like that, that's led by the artists themselves. And so it just for us, the idea was to keep it clean so that the premium content and the live experiences are coming directly from the artist that you paid to come here to see, while also providing a place to talk amongst themselves in a group chat. So there still is this area for members to engage, but we kind of took the other approach, like I said, of making it very clear that this is a space led by the creator, and you're effectively in the creator's house here, right? And you've got that extra level of access, if you will.
Oh, so those are pretty different models, I guess, right? And I guess I'm curious for both of you on the challenges maybe you faced in bringing that to reality, right? Like, so I can say for sure, Arnold's pitch sounds probably better for the community, but harder to get going, right? And Abhinav sounds probably better to the creator, but maybe like equally hard to get going, right? Like, I don't know, because one of the reasons we're focusing on Web3 so much, I think now, is that like, I don't want to have to convince someone that they need a community, right? And I guess like, how do you straddle that challenge, right? Like how do you get around that? Or what have you found anything to be effective in convincing people that it's, or maybe it's just more of a selection process? Like, forget it. We don't actually convince anyone either. We find the right people, and what would those criteria look like, right?
Yeah. So I think so you're absolutely right. I mean, it's hard, right? There's a lot of work involved. Running a community is not simple, no matter how you try to build it, right? Certainly, our approach was kind of born from the idea of talking to several different creators and hearing the same feedback that I have a community, right? It's maybe in a platform like Discord right now, but it's kind of confusing. Nobody knows where I am or who's running it or what the format is, right? Like how to hear my voice, right? My voice kind of gets like drowned out with all of the overall chatter in the community, right? And so that's kind of what led us down down that road of a bit organizing it in the way that we did. But I think the focus was really trying to start by identifying people that already had this idea of a true community where people were actively wanting to converse with themselves, but then very clearly hear from the creator. And so it made it a little bit easier from a selling point. But it has been definitely a difficult challenge because I think while we've gotten the feedback from a lot of our creators that I'd like to have this organized community, that I'd like it to run smoothly and have things really well organized. Once we kind of show them, hey, this is what you need to do in order to have that happen, and here's how you can do it, I think they see it's quite a bit of effort, and I think that becomes just the challenge, right? I want to do this, I love the platform, but it's just so much of my time. How do I make it easier? I think it's been a lot of the I've gotten that question many times. And that's you know, I don't, that's where the challenge is, right? There is no way to make it easier. It's just, it's work, just like, you know, any other aspect of creation, right?
So one quick follow-up, I guess, then when you're looking at, you know, considering a creator to maybe to reach out to, are there any telltale signs in your mind like, oh, this person has a community and they would benefit from sort of hang glide, right? Like is there something you see that helps you discern that?
No, absolutely. So some of the sort of telltales that we look for is, you know, does this person already have a fairly active community somewhere else on like an existing chat-based platform,
Okay.
maybe a Discord or a Telegram? Is this person doing like, you know, special things when they drop a new album, where, you know, where they may be releasing something a bit early, right, or some early access to some new content, and maybe they're hosting that on some other, you know, channel, right, some other like platform. Essentially, do they have this group of really engaged folks that are probably obviously a much smaller percentage of their overall audience on like a standard platform like Instagram or somewhere? Is that in place, and are those people trying to communicate somewhere with them? And they're trying to communicate back, but in a very fragmented way, right? And so once we see that, that's when we kind of swoop in and say, hey, we built this thing. It's, you know, it's an amazing place. We can bring all that together and just simplify that component of it, right? Because there's the community management piece, but then there's the overall tool sprawl and you know, management of that as well, which I think is also something, you know.
I like the signal there, because I think to me with that, what you're really tuning into is, can I move people? And like, if I try to move people, will they follow, right? Like, because I do think that is a sign of cohesion, right? Like, or that there's optionality in terms of increasing cohesion for your audience, right? So that's a really good insight there. Abhinav, how about you?
Yeah, so I think from our point, it's not much different, but just the signal we're listening to perhaps slightly different. So what we're looking out for is essentially communities that are looking for a deeper engagement, right? So for example, you know, we're broader than just creators. So things like DAOs. If you're listening to some of the conversations around DAOs, the problem that people are facing is it's 10,000 people in the community and nobody feels like they know each other, right? And so when we hear something like that, that's our sweet spot, because letting people see each other through short snippets and getting that sense of like, okay, I've seen your face, I kind of know you now. At least I won't tell you to get lost. I will consider your human self as somebody that I'm talking to beyond when I react. So communities which need that. So I think the DAOs are a good example of that, which are definitely many to many. There is the top-down sort of flow of information is not necessarily the only way they operate. But then also with creators where they see the need to move beyond the Discord, right? And I think it would have to be coming from their community asking them or seeking greater interaction, asking for phone calls. What's weird for me is with Discord, and I think you kind of hit on it, Greg, is you've got these tools, the video tools, the audio tools. Nobody uses them, right? And it's just not the norm. They're there, but nobody uses them, and it's kind of like, well, you go first, right? It's like, I don't know why we haven't had so many more audio and video calls through Discord, but it's just not the norm. And I think so creating an environment where video first, audio first is the norm, setting that precedent when they come on, you know, for people that are seeking that's kind of our sweet spot. And we haven't nailed how to find those people, but you know, those are the signals that we look for.
I hear you on that. And I think one, it's because the tools in Discord are super crappy. Right. It's hard, you know, when something starts a certain way and then it stays that, it's hard to not be that way. Like when you look at the Discord API, there's freaking like guilds all over the API. And I'm like, what the hell is a guild? Right. Like, and it's so like wired into like a gaming mindset, right? Like that, you know, it just doesn't make sense. And, you know, for example, one of the feedback I've gotten from people who are like, yeah, this is why I'd like to be trying Zealous is like, I can't screen share and do audio at the same time, for example, right? Like it's just stupid things like this, right? Like, I don't even think there's video rooms, even though the API talks about like 1080p and 720p like resolution, but it just doesn't seem to render I did join one once that where I could share screen, but it was from the phone. But if I'm in the desktop app, I can't do it, right? So I think there's some incongruous parts there, right? Like where like it's not particularly well formed. Also, it can only be spawned by like, it seems very restrictive, right? Like, so I think to your point, like Abhinav, right? Like that for the community to embrace these tools, they need more options to use them too, right? And it seems very ratcheted down in Discord, at least. Maybe that's just like the default setting and no one ever sets it a different way. But like there seems to be very few stages, for example, set up. There's very few audio chat rooms that I see set up. It also could just be that the cohesiveness hasn't made it there yet, or there isn't a need to connect further with more fidelity, right? Like if you're a bunch of people who collect like a PFP, you probably have 0 things that overlap, right? Like now, if you're buying like a utility coin or interested in a DAO where there's like longer term value and you may have more like value alignment, then yeah, maybe there's more room, for some of those use cases to like foster more quality conversations or spin out conversations and things like that. And so I do think like you can build a community platform for one of those quadrants, right? But it's probably hard to build a community platform for all of the quadrants, right?
Yeah.
No, for
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, that's why we're not fighting, right? We're putting for different quadrants, absolutely. Like there's meaning and purpose, and depending on which area you're focusing on, you're gonna be the right product for that group of people.
Yeah. For example, like I think where Arnold is positioning is actually like towards more the higher quality, higher fidelity, because he like you're basically trying to level up a game you've already moved to like other levels, right? Like versus your feed is kind of like, hey, like how do we move engagement just up a level beyond like, create a little more cohesion, right? And increase a little the fidelity, right? Like, so you're kind of like the top left, right? Like if we're all on the same visualization of this, right? And Arnold's maybe a little bit more like maybe bottom or middle right? Like, cause he's sort of like, great, like I want a more cohesive group of people, like smaller potentially, right? But also higher touch, right? And again, it depends on the vantage point. Like, am I looking at it as the organizer or am I looking at it as the community member, right? Because I think that's an important distinction as well. So I know I put the screws to you guys a lot. Do you guys have any questions that you want to ask me?
Where's this thread? Because I want to be looking at it as we're speaking.
We need to go write it still.
Let's go do that.
You guys know my process now. This is how it works. Like I get a thought, then I bring you in here to beat it up, and then I'll make the thread.
No, so Greg, I guess I know you've kind of been adding lots of functionality and thinking you thought to kind of continue to evolve on the zealous end as well. So just Abhinav and I have kind of talked about where we've positioned our platforms and kind of what types of creator communities or artist communities we're looking to try to go after and support. I'm curious, like where your thought is right now for zealous along those lines.
Yeah, that's a good question. Also, I would probably say where we're seeing the most interest, at least, right, tends to be so. The big learning I think we've had, and I think I've shared this with you privately, but I'll share it with everybody, is that, and I alluded to it before, was that in reaching out to people like that had Patreons, for example, right, I just wasn't getting replies, right? Like it was very difficult. And I think like there's this calculus that goes on when you talk to a creator, who's got a big audience, for example. They're like, well, if I make another video, I'm going to make $50,000 and I don't have to do any of this hard, like labor intensive relationship building, like potentially letting more people down things, right? Like, and so those were folks that I felt like they may be like some of the ones like you're describing, Arnold, that have moved people already, like they've moved them to Patreon already, right? Or whatever it may be. But Patreon is more of a payment mechanism than it is a community, right? So what we realize and reaching out to sort of Web3 world, I think, right, like is where we've seen the most traction. And the way I probably would describe it is just that they are folks who are trying to keep a community versus the people who are thinking about starting one, right? So if I look at an NFT project, or I look at someone with a social token, or I look at someone with a DAO, they're actually trying to maintain, they're trying to make like that process, that thing sustained for as long as possible. And they're also trying to like reduce friction so that more people can more readily get into that ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
So I would say probably that's where the sweet spot that I've discovered, at least like for our product is, right, is in the folks who literally are like, how do I not lose this collection of people that I've got together, and I need more red meat to sort of feed them. And, you know, obviously there's a limit to how much I can produce, or there's things going on and they need to collaborate. And the fact that they leave us to go do that collaboration somewhere else is actually destructive or deleterious to sort of our effort, right? So I think that's probably where we see sort of the zeroing in, at least in the short term. And I don't think that that's exclusive to Web3. I just think that that's the mindset, right? Of it.
This actually makes me curious because, you know, one of the points I actually had noted to kind of chat about is that's one of my big sort of selling pitches when I'm talking to music artists, right? It's like, look, you've got this audience of like, you know, 500,000 people on your Instagram, right? But when you look at it, you know, maybe 1,500 of those people are really hitting it hard with engagement, and they're like literally trying to get more access to you, right? You're missing out on a huge opportunity to like get those people into a more elevated space, and you can charge a premium for it, whatever. But that's a missed opportunity. It seems like, you know, in your description, folks on the Web3 side understand that a bit better, like by default. I'm curious what the difference, like why are they getting it more on the Web3 side? I think maybe more traditional creators and
maybe Abhinav can speak to this too, because I know he's been pretty active as well. But my argument would just be that those are ecosystem thinkers, like by default, right? Like, so when you create an NFT, you're basically launching an ecosystem, right? Like when you build a utility token, you're thinking through an ecosystem, right? Like when you start a DAO, it's an organization. And so I just think like the structural trappings of like a community and sort of an operating group, et cetera, are just latent in there, right? Like, and it is fundamental to succeeding versus like the way you described it, right? Like opportunistic means unless you may be right, but until you show that a whole bunch of people are making money doing that, no one wants to start, right? Like you run into this sort of like cold start problem, I guess, right? Like where it's like, sure, you say so, right? But how much time does it take me? This was like the old cold start problem with Patreon, right? Like you're like, crap, I sold my first Patreon. Now I got to deliver all this crap I promised for the one person who bought the $20 a month plan, right? Now, and it doesn't break even until like, you get to like the 400th person or whatever it's going to be, right? And so everyone is scared of the upside of that slope unless they have like very clear, obvious examples. And even, I think, have you shared that article with me about how Patreon validated or eliminated or sort of sorted people that were the right fit for them? They want to turn away those people, right? Like they don't want the people who, like, even though they have the examples, they don't want the people who are here because of the example, right? Like they don't want someone who's here because they think they're going to get rich by just starting a Patreon and boom, like all of a sudden it's going to work, right?
Yeah, I think the thing that we talked about for any community to be a true community, they've got to be doing something that creates value for the rest of the community. With crypto communities, that's inbuilt in. That's the fundamental purpose of the community, as well as whatever else may be sort of theological or sort of aspirational reasons. So that, as a starting point, is a very different thing to I'm the creator. This is my audience. Now, hopefully, my community. And then
even if it's shilling, right? Even if it's just shilling things, it's still creating value, right? Like, so absolutely, that is true. Yeah, there's an interesting amount of resonance with that. So I do think like my caution, just from my observations, right, is that I think you can find like one or two to snipe, like where there's pent up demand in either place, but like it only clicked in for me like after doing like in the last week. You guys know, you've seen like I've been showing you my iterations, right? Like this is happening in real time, but it took like we've known each other all for like 7 months now. It took that long for me to figure that out, right? Like so so I, you know, like where it's like obvious that if I go talk to a person that has these attributes, I know I'm going to get like a callback. I know we're going to have a conversation, right? Like, or something like that. This is why, by the way, like the original approach that we went through with Zealous was like sort of a B2B thing, because I think there are stakeholders in the ecosystem that may have more interest in this, right? Like, so for example, for Arnold, if you're working in a music space, it may be that the manager is the better person, right? Like, but what you actually have to do, I believe, is like we've talked about this in varying ways. I think the total cost of ownership of a community is an unknowable thing to some degree, and we need to make it. We need to put some borders around it minimally for you to start to understand the cost of having it, right? Because like you can't just say you can make this much. You have to know what it costs to operate, right? And I think like if in their mind it's like this is gonna be an extra 20 hours a week of me, I was like, screw that. I could just make like literally one extra video a week and I'll make $100,000 more per month, right? Like that's the math or the calculus I think you're actually like all of us have been running into, right? Like ultimately, right? Is what is the cost or the time it takes to actually do the thing that you're describing, right? Because if it's greater, if it's not like a negative cost ultimately, right? Like then we're likely to fail, right? Like, so for example, I'll give you a good product feature. If, for all of us, if we could self-identify who your moderator should be and let you onboard moderators, you would eliminate the work, right? The perceived work of managing and running the community, right? Like, so, you know, a good proxy here, go look at anyone's follower count, doesn't matter. Look at how many comments they get, right? And then more importantly, if you look at how many unique commenters there are, that's probably a closer proxy to like the community size than the actual follower count would be, right?
Yes.
And if you could present that list to them and say like, hey, here's the people we think you should make your moderators and we'll onboard them for you as you start this process, right? Make them captains, whatever you call them in your ecosystem. But if, for example, just thinking out loud product-wise, if you started with that, now you're setting the perceived cost kind of down to zero, right?
No, absolutely. And it's funny because this is this is actually a space that we've been moving into over the last couple of months based on like well over 100 conversations with different creators and artists is really about that services piece, right? It's like how much more of this can we help with to simplify? Because not one conversation I've had where any artist or creator said, I don't need a community or I don't want it. It's always just about, to your point, how much is this going to cost me, right? And so now the new idea is like, well, we built this technology platform, but can we provide this operational layer too to simplify this thing for you so that you get the community, you get the benefit of it, your people get the benefit of it, but you don't have to deal with these other things that you just don't want to do, right? So no, it's very interesting. I think that's probably, of all of the different technological pieces, I think that's probably one of the most important things that certainly I overlooked in the very beginning that I'm coming back to.
It's easy to overlook because we see the value, like we're deep in like the value that can be created. But like this was the hard lesson, like, because I'm sharing it because I learned it the hard way too, right? But it's not even the freaking financial cost. Like honestly, you could tell them it costs $1,000 a month, right? Like that's probably not the part that's going to scare them away. They're like, how do I manage it, right? Like because like
I'll tell
as
you
they
openly,
increasingly have a team,
I'll tell you openly, like I've had at least a handful of people just recently tell me, like, listen, you could double your monthly take rate if you just manage the thing for me. So it's not about, it's not about that or the cost. It's like the thing is important. They want it. The community, they see the value. But it's really just the time frame, that value.
It's the iceberg problem, right? Like, like you can't just show them the product and be like, see this thing? Because they see, they're in the submarine looking at all the shit going on in their life and all the little things that they had to hold up, right? And they are like, it takes me 8 people to put my video out because I got my sound guy, I got my editing person, I got my social media person, and they're like, do I just give all of this to them then, right? Like, or if I'm a solo and I'm going into this on my own, they're like, whoa, I don't got time for this, right? Like, I barely can reply to comments. I don't look at my DMs anymore because they're like, I'm completely bankrupt when it comes to like inbox zero, right? Like, that's the thing I think that like as builders, we have to really appreciate and figure out how to solve for, like, because that part of the problem, if we don't eliminate that, I don't see how we make it easy for people to start this transition.
Well, no, it makes me think. I think it was last week you had the conversation. You had Jen on, right, on the show, and she's talking about how she got started with the engagement with Justin, right? And it was very much that same thing. It's like here's everything we can do.
I'll do everything.
Like,
yeah, don't worry about it. Right, that was what you said. Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I've already done some of it for you to take a look at right now. And it's like,
right.
It makes it a no-brainer, right? So I think that's the thing that, it's kind of an obvious sort of thing when you take a step back, right? But I think that's the thing that certainly on my end I've been missing. Like, here's amazing technology and it can do all this stuff, and here's the opportunity you're missing. But it's that layer of introducing that layer to help grease the wheels a bit. So
I've said many times, Abhinav, that I still think, like, if we ever decide to start another startup and we were going to do it together, it would be an operations business for the creator space. Like, just go hire people to do all the other roles they don't want to do, and just have like one house that you can just buy all the services from. Like, I need my accounting done, I need my travel concierge service, I need my editing suite. Like, someone just needs to put all of that together, put an API on it, and just let anyone talk to it.
Well, Greg, it's funny because in the creative economy Slack community, you've got all of the builders you need to we can make this.
We do. But we don't have any workers, right? Like, it's a house full of managers. But what do you think, Abhinav? I mean, what have you seen, I guess, as challenges, I guess, in getting people to start?
Yeah, I mean, I am master of mock-ups. It is you have to build it for them, right? Like, I think earlier I spoke to Justin Moore, and he gave me the good advice. Was like, if you're outreaching to people, just you got to do all the work for them. And you're talking about a little bit further down the road in terms of the day-to-day stuff, but in terms of that upfront like outreach, and even that part needs to be quite well developed, where they go, I don't need to think I don't have to build mental models of what the hell this thing is going to be or could become. Show it to me, build it for me, right? And so just literally, like, I don't know how many mock-ups I did, right? Like, so that part I think was a good learning and representative of the rest of the onboard process.
Yeah, number one sales technique when we were at Shoot was because we had a user-generated content platform, so we would literally we'd start tracking the brand hashtag like the day before or whatever. We'd walk in and we'd be like, great, here, watch, I'll show you. I'll create up like a display that you could like run on a billboard in Times Square right now, right? Like, powered by fan photos, right? And literally just by being able to show them that, it is really, really powerful in getting to like a yes, right?
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Great. Well, gang, this has been an awesome convo. I do appreciate you taking the time to join me. And forget that guy, Ken, man. Can't even show up for his own show. Yeah.
We'll make sure we give him the business tomorrow in the holiday party.
Ken does have a job. Yeah, we're going to have what kind of shots should we be doing during the holiday party is the real question. I'm going to be doing some big AMA drops tomorrow, actually. So I didn't set up a code yet, but tomorrow I'm going to do some larger drops for folks who make it to the studio. So if you are listening and get a chance to drop in tomorrow, there'll be some surprises built into into the show as well. So gents, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I think it was a really great conversation. I did record the space as well, by the way, so that audio will be out there, but of course this video is going to be on YouTube and a whole bunch of other places. But thanks for sharing and dealing with the little grilling. I know I didn't prep you on what we were going to chat about per se, but as always, great sports and very informative. So thanks so much. Appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow at the holiday party.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.